Okay, now let's say that somebody wants to override the output of this theme function slightly to change the styling a bit. What would they need to do in order to do that? Well, they have two options. First of all, they can implement an override in the module layer, or they can override in the theme layer. If they did the theme layer route, they would add the function override to the template.php file. Now, if you're a developer, this isn't a big deal. It's a simple function, and overriding it is a simple process. But if you're not a developer and you're used to working with simple HTML and CSS, then creating a function can be a real hurdle. So there's a way that we can provide the same override functionality without requiring that the user write their own function for it. And that's by using a template file instead of a theme function. And so that's what we're going to demonstrate next. Go ahead and jump to your module directory and open up the fifth step, which is called adding theme files. Like before, go ahead and copy the entire code and paste it over the code that's currently in your lookandfeel.module file and save it. What we're going to do in this example is basically recreate the theme function that we built and implement it as a template file instead. The only thing that will be different is the background color, so we can see when we're using the theme function and when we're using the template file. We've added a couple lines here to our page output, and we've added one more item to the theme registry here. And that's all of our new code in this file. Let's begin by looking at our invocation. So we're using the theme function, and we're passing it lookandfeel_strike2. And then as the settings array, we're passing it just a string, and we're assigning the string a value. So far, this is identical to our implementation of a theme function, except as you can tell by looking at the code, we don't have a function called theme_lookandfeel_strike2. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at how we're adding this to the registry. So we have lookandfeel_strike2 here, again, the same as a theme function. We have the variables that we're passing it, which is identical to our previous example. But this third parameter, template, is different. This tells the theme registry where to look for the template file. And all we're doing is passing it the name of the file minus its tpl.php extension. And the reason why that's missing is that the theme registry doesn't know what template engine that we're using. By default, it will use PHP template. By default, the registry will look in the module that's defining the hook theme where the template is registered. So this will look in our look and feel module folder. So let's go ahead and look for that. I'm going to jump back to our module folder. And here we have a file called strike2.tpl.php. I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Our template file contains two parts. At the top we have some comments, and at the bottom we have our template, which is in HTML, with a little bit of PHP thrown in there to print variables. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at this. At the top we have our opening PHP tag and ID tag for CVS, and this is pretty standard. We've seen this in the module file, for example. And then we have a Doxygen style comment block, also standard for module files as well, that includes a description of the file, and this description would be similar to what we would put above a theme function if we were using a function instead of a template file. Next, we have a list of the available variables. Now, this is really important to add to the comments, otherwise the themer might not have a good idea of what's available to them to work with. And then below that, we have our closing PHP tag and the HTML of our template file. Now, we want to make sure that we use HTML and then intersperse PHP instead of the other way around, because the goal here is to make something that's a lot easier to work with for people who are used to CSS and HTML rather than PHP development. Okay, let's go ahead and make sure that our module file is saved. And let's go back to our site and clear the caches. so that the theme registry will load in our template file. Okay, now scroll down to the bottom. If you see this bottom part here where we have our second strike through that's not styled with a red background, that means our template file is working. The only thing left is to style our strike tag with an external CSS style sheet, but before we discuss how to do that, we need to talk about pre-processing functions. The idea of pre-processing functions is that they allow modules or themes to tap into the variable set that's being passed to a theme function or a template file. And it can do this in order to sanitize data that's being passed to the function or file. It can add additional values or variables to it, or it can just alter the way that the variables function in some way. So whereas template files and theming functions have one function or file that wins out, pre-processing functions overlap on top of one another. So when you add a pre-processing function, it doesn't interrupt the execution of additional pre-processing functions. But what it does do is allow you to intercept the variables, and at that point you can reset those, but you can also simply modify them in some way. So what I've described is a layering of pre-processing functions. Typically, it will start with the module that defines the theme function, and it will add a pre-processing function, the original pre-processing function, and then a hook will be run that will check any other modules for additional pre-processing functions for that theme function. From there, it will go to the theme and check for any pre-processing functions there.